Welcome to the Extra Podcast, a production of Northview Community Church in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Your hosts, Jeff, Ezra, and Thaleia, will be discussing the Bible, relevant issues, and current events each week. At Northview, we love to study God's Word and discuss how it applies to our lives, but we try not to take ourselves too seriously. So feel free to laugh with us and at us as we try to challenge and encourage you in your faith.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Extra Podcast. My name is Thaleia. I'm one of the pastors on staff. I'm sitting with two of my pastor friends, Jeff.
Hi, how are you, Thaleia?
Good. Lead pastor of Northview, and Andy Steiger.
Good to be here. You have a lovely voice, Thaleia.
Pastor of all kinds of things, young adults, and director of Apologetics Canada, which we're going to get into in a few minutes. Mm-hmm. But first, we get us warmed up, I have a question of the day. So, Andy and Jeff, what are your worst desserts? Like, you go to a buffet table and they have this amazing display of desserts. What is something you would not touch at all?
Fruitcake. Actually, anything with the fruit in it, it's stupid. Like cooked fruit, you know what I mean? Like the regular fruit, if you have grapes and stuff, I'm cool with that. But like if you cook fruit and put it in things, like raisins, what's that?
You're not talking about pies and strudels and stuff like that.
No. Yeah, sorry.
Dried fruit.
No, that's right. But I don't know, like if you put cake and you put like raisins or cranberries or whatever in it, knock it off.
Okay, so I'm going to have to disagree with that. Give me fruit anyway, shape or form,
really?
Cooked or not, yeah.
Okay.
But tapioca pudding would be
Ew.
mine. Anything with gross, slimy texture.
Have you ever had that, what do they call that stuff, though, that has the ambrosia? Is that a dessert?
Oh, that's that marshmallow fruit
some
salad
ambrosia.
thing.
Oh,
That's
do you?
disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
Marshmallows, there it is. I hate marshmallows. What is
In
that?
dessert.
Marshmallows.
Oh, you don't like them at all? What about s'mores?
No, I don't like them.
Don't like them. I don't like nuts in things. So you have this great chocolate chip cookie or brownie and people put nuts in there.
The peanut
that's
M&M?
disgusting.
You don't like the peanut M&M?
No.
Oh, jeez.
I can do almonds.
Even a macadamia nut?
This is...
But in stuff, like you're just wrecking a cookie
Wow.
or a brownie. So I make
I
Mark
don't know if
go
I
and
can
eat
continue in ministry with either of you.
The feelings are mutual.
I make Mark go and eat it, and I tell him, "Is there nuts in there?" And if there's nuts, he's fine. And I'm like, "That's disgusting."
I only feel that way about walnuts. I find that's
I hate
just
walnuts.
disgusting.
Disgusting.
Does anybody really like... Have you ever noticed in the mixed nut that when they make those buckets of mixed nuts, it's half walnuts, like 1/8 cashews, and the rest...
It's how they sell walnuts.
Almonds?
They gotta tease you in.
What?
So they say, "Hey, we'll give you some other nuts, but
Here's some walnuts.
mostly walnuts."
Yeah, cashews are bad too.
What?
Yeah, terrible.
Really? You think cashews are bad?
Terrible. You like them?
Yeah.
What
Cashews
about
are the best
pecan
nut.
pie? You like pecan pie?
You know what? Listen, if you have... Come on, it's a pie. Yes.
No, it has nuts in it. Well,
No,
that's disgusting.
by the way, it's called... I was told once by a guy in Texas, it's pecan.
Yeah, I know. We say
It's pecan pie.
pecan.
No, it's pecan.
Pecan. It's
No,
like, do you
seriously,
say-
this is the way the conversation went. I
Do you
kept saying,
say-
yeah, we say pecan. And he'd say, no, it's pecan. Yeah, but it's just the way different people say it. No, it's not the different way people say it. It's pecan.
So do you say apricot or apricot?
I don't know.
What do you say, Andy?
Apricot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
sure,
do you
I'll
say,
that.
like the second day, third day of the week? Tuesday or Tuesday?
Oh, that's
Whoa,
definitely
wait,
Tuesday.
what?
Tuesday or Tuesday?
Oh, that second one's Ponzi.
That deserves a slap. To
Doesn't
the
it?
face.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree. So I say that to a few people in my life to say Tuesday. What is that?
The one that always
There's
bothered
no-
me was penalized versus penalized.
Oh.
I didn't like penalized. It's penalized.
Penalized gets too close to some other words.
Yeah.
Not good.
Like penalty? Penultimate.
So anyway, that's going into the last part of our
yeah,
content
that's actually
today.
getting cut. Yeah, that's getting cut. You're hilarious.
We better cut that out.
Uh,
Okay, Jeff, start the interview process.
Thaleia has turned very red at the moment. Andy, actually, the reason that you're here is because we want to know more about you. And so Andy Steiger is currently what did you call yourself? Are you the director of Apologetics Canada? Is that your title with that?
yeah, although I think we're gonna have to change it because as the ministry has grown, we have people serving in Ontario and now Steve Kim's in Alberta.
Yeah, so you want them to have that name.
Yeah.
So maybe you could be called Grand Director.
Grand Master President.
The Reverend Most High.
But you, Andy, you're from the United States. You grew up in the U.S. and
That's right.
were born into what?
Born in Redding, California. At 5 years of age, moved to Portland, Oregon, and stayed there until I was 19, and I moved to Canada.
But when you were in those early stages, when did you come to faith in Christ? Were you in a Christian family?
It's kind of a it's kind of, maybe you could cut all my pausing out of here. Yes and no.
Do you not remember?
So I grew up in a non-Christian family, I would say.
Yeah.
And
Church going though?
no. So parents did not go to church. They ended up divorcing, and my mom began to go to church. So I saw my mom going to church, and I saw her grow in her faith.
How old were you when your parents divorced?
I was 5.
Okay. So is that the reason that you moved from Reading?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So when my parents separated, my mom moved us
Did you grow up
to Portland.
Did you grow up knowing your dad very well?
I didn't know him at all, really. I've only met him or seen him a couple times, like a handful of times.
Okay.
In my life, and my last name wasn't Steiger. My dad's last name is Turnbaugh. When my mom got remarried, it's kind of a long story, but my dad wanted my stepdad to adopt me so that he didn't have to pay child support, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of fun facts about Andy Steiger.
Yeah.
It's interestingly enough, I didn't know if I wanted to keep that name Steiger when I got married to Nancy. We actually toyed with the idea of taking her last name.
Oh, wow.
But we ended up keeping it.
You would have been Mennonite.
I know, right?
I know. You should maybe think about attaching that on there, like some kind of hyphenated form.
Yeah. Steiger Schellenberg.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love her parents and just the wonderful family that they have. But then Nancy and I realized we get to start our own new family.
Yeah. So how old were you when your mom remarried?
That's a good question. I can't remember.
Yeah.
No.
But do you remember growing up in a home with a dad and a mom, a stepdad and a mom, or do you remember the days when you were not?
It wasn't a healthy relationship.
Okay.
So I often tell people I just grew up without a dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Portland, the Portland area.
Yep.
And when did you come to? Did you involved in church at all?
Yeah, so then my mom started bringing me to church when she started.
What kind of church?
Attending church, and so she brought me to this church called Milwaukee First Baptist.
Okay.
And so I started attending that church, if you will, and ultimately my cousins started coming too. We were living at their house at the time, and so it was interesting watching God at work, not only in my mom's life but in my aunt's life as well, and my uncle.
Did you come to faith in Christ? Would you say you came to faith in Christ at that church, or was it at another?
I would, yeah, eventually.
Do you remember when it happened, or is it something that you just kind of grew into and then look back and think, I actually believe all this stuff?
Well, for me, I had always known that God existed. The question that I always wrestled with was who was God, and did I want to know that God and follow that God? And so when I started going to church, it was really, I would say, going to church just because my mom was taking me there. And although I found it interesting and I saw the impact it was having on her life, I didn't necessarily see that as something for me until I was in high school. So it's kind of weird because I had moments when I was younger where I really drew near to God, but it wasn't. I would say it wasn't until I was 17 years old that I said, no, I actually want to know this God.
Was there something that precipitated that decision, or is it?
Well, yeah, I was at a conference, and as often I was talking with myself in my mind as the speaker was talking, and I look back and I think I was having a conversation with the Lord in many ways, where I was basically feeling quite convicted on this idea that I believed that God existed, but I wasn't willing to act on that belief. And so I just had this conversation with myself that if you actually think that that's true, why wouldn't you live like that's true?
Right.
And then I decided, I wanted to stop being inconsistent about that, and I wanted to actually pursue that.
So was there did the guy, back in those days, Andy, I'm assuming, what is this, early 90s, late 80s?
Yeah, it would have been in 1996, 95.
Okay, so I'm thinking back in those days, was it still to the point where people would go to conferences and they would invite people forward, or was it just to kind of keep your head down, eyes closed, raise your hand, or was it just sort of this is just something that happened and that you went home and knew that there was some change that took place?
Yeah, so this guy was talking about prophecy. So no altar call. It was I kind of was not really tracking with him.
Isn't that great?
I kind of thought the whole thing was weird. So I actually thought the whole thing was kind of weird. I left so I had that conversation where I was like, you know what, I actually want to act on this. But I was still needing to, in some ways figure this all out. But as I left, I just looked down at this table as I'm leaving this conference, and there's this organization there called Delta Ministries, and they were having this missions trip to the Andes Mountains for people who wanted to bring the gospel into these mountains. And I just felt compelled to take this pamphlet home. Mm-hmm. But over the next weeks and months, as God began to work in my heart, I found myself compelled to go on this trip. Yeah. Seems all weird, I know, right? But that began a journey of life change for me.
So would you say that was like one of the most, if I were going to ask you, what were the kind of key moments in Andy Steiger's spiritual development? Yeah. Was that one of them?
It was. And the reason is because on that missions trip, the president of Delta Ministries, Brian Heerwagen, was on that trip and became a good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And then as well, the missionary in Argentina named Dave Greenman also became good friends of mine. And they really mentored me.
What kind of ministry was it?
Delta Ministries is a short-term mission agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what they did.
That's
they
what
took. And you were still in high school or college that age?
I was in high school.
Okay.
And so I went in March. It was my graduating year, and I took 3 weeks out and went off to Argentina.
Yeah.
Wow. Preached my very first sermon to a bunch of sheep herders.
Yeah.
So, talking about Jesus being a good shepherd.
So
Never
Andy,
forget it.
how did you end up in Canada then?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I went back to that conference after I graduated. And this was like the 1 year they did it for young adults, and they would pair you in a room with some stranger, which is, looking back on it, I'm thinking, what a bad idea. So I was paired off with this guy in a hotel room, and he was telling me.
That's even a worse idea.
Yeah.
Whoa, no.
Just knock on the door.
I know.
He'll answer.
So
healthy boundaries, can we say? Anyway, okay.
Back then you could do those things.
I guess.
So I'm in this hotel room with this guy, and he's telling me about this wonderful land called Canada. And truthfully, I was one of those stereotypical Americans that thought Canada was a part of the U.S. that no one talked about, and it was really far north. And then he said that there was this program at this school in which you could do your BA and do a backpacking degree at the same time.
Cool.
And I thought, that sounds fantastic, the backpacking part.
Of course, you are that kind of guy.
Yeah, so I came up to Canada, and that was the year.
What school?
So it was at Trinity, at Northwest Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
And that was before they closed. They started this program that now CBC has called Trek Request. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And that was the year that Mount Baker set the world record. Record for the most amount of snowfall. So when I came up to Canada, I thought this place is a winter wonderland. Like, I thought that was typical. And it's that I have come to the right place. And I'll never forget, this is how dumb I was. When I came up to Canada for the first time, I pulled off in Bellingham to get a hotel for the night. Looking back, I'm like, there were so many signs.
Thinking to yourself, it's going to be another several
really
hours.
That's honestly what I thought.
Where's my flares and my sleeping bag and my
I thought I had an epic
blanket?
journey ahead the next day. So I had pulled over, got some good rest. Yeah, the next day, 30 minutes later, I'm at the
You're
border.
like, wait a minute.
No GPS, which would have told you 45 minutes.
I am an idiot.
Depending on the border crossing.
So did you meet your wife, Nancy? Did you meet her at the school?
I did. So that year, there was the Christmas banquet. And I'll never forget looking across the banquet, as men often do, just eyeing the scenery. And I saw this beautiful girl in a red dress. And I thought to myself...
And Nancy was right next to her.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Thanks.
Just kidding.
That's
That's
great.
a joke.
And I thought, I've got to somehow, introduce myself to that lady. And I managed to do it.
You did. And so, love at first sight?
It really was, truthfully. Although I'd go on to try to break up with Nancy multiple times.
Why?
Because I had lots of dad issues. I was terrified of commitment. I thought for sure I was going to screw up marriage. I thought for sure I was going to be just like my dad. I thought for sure I was going to marry the wrong lady. I was just plain afraid. And I love my wife dearly because thank God she wasn't afraid of my insecurities. And I'll never forget, I went 2 weeks without calling her once. And she called up my mom to get my phone number because I had gone down the States and then came back. she got my phone number. My mom's like, "Oh, you call that boy, right?" And she calls me up, and Nancy goes, "I'll never forget it." She goes, "Listen, if you want to break up with me, you got to do it like a man."
It's very Nancy.
It's very Nancy.
And we've been together ever since.
Because you've never been a man.
That's awesome.
That's great. That's great. So how long
Pretty
did you
funny.
date her before you married her?
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years that we
Okay.
dated. I wanted to be done with college before.
All right.
we got
How
married.
did you ask her?
And then Nancy and I walked the train tracks at Trinity, which is many a couple have walked those tracks. And so when I asked her to marry me, we went back on those train tracks.
Was it a surprise to her?
I don't think it's really a surprise to most ladies, but I tried. I tried my
Yeah,
best.
good.
Yeah.
So where are you at now? Tell us about your family.
Well, now Nancy and I have been married for like 18 years, and I have now been living in Canada longer than I lived in the U.S., which is a real identity challenge right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
How old are you, Andy?
I am 40 this year, turned the big 40. And so I have two boys. I have Tristan and William. Tristan is 11 and William's 9. Love being a dad, love being married, love being a husband, and learning how to do that well.
How did you get involved in apologetics work?
Oh, you got to take a break.
Oops,
A
sorry.
commercial break first.
Join us March 1st and 2nd for the 9th Annual Apologetics Canada Conference, taking place here at Northview Community Church at the Downs Road campus. The conference begins Friday night with a panel discussion on religious freedom. The focus will be on the increasing challenge of being a public Christian here in Canada. On this Saturday, we will be hearing from leading thinkers on a variety of topics from faith and politics, human dignity, the reliability of Scripture, and so much more. For full conference details and to register, visit our conference website at apologeticscanadaconference.com.
Okay, welcome back from the break. We're going to spend some more time with Andy. And Jeff, you were starting to go into his ministry. So now we're going to go into his ministry.
So, Andy, I mean, you're really interested in apologetics. I mean, seems to be something you've been wired to do. Philosophy, that sort of stuff. You ended up at Biola University for a period for a master's degree. Can you just tell us how that happened? You got a degree, I'm assuming, from Trinity or from CBC or from...
Well, I went to Northwest. They ended up closing, so I had to do a couple more classes at CBC, which has kind of been just a running joke.
Yeah, they put you on some of their material, don't they?
Yeah, and I got Alumni of the Year once, and
Nice.
which is pretty awesome. So, but I love CBC. But yeah, so thankfully they allowed me to finish it off there, and then I've been in ministry for 20 years.
Did you immediately
as a
go
youth.
from there down to, did you?
No,
was there a
I
gap?
immediately went into ministry. So right after I graduated from college, I went into ministry in Coquitlam, worked at Eagle Ridge Bible Fellowship.
What does that mean, going to ministry? What did you do?
I was a young adults pastor, but I also worked with middle school.
Okay.
And quite quickly realized I was not cut out for middle school.
Okay.
And so then just went to youth ministry. Did that for 2 years. Then Nancy and I quit our jobs, both of us. She was working with Youth for Christ, and she worked with them for a number of years. We were living in Vancouver at the time. Quit our jobs and went traveling for a year. And
Where'd you go?
We went all over the world. So we went first to Malaysia, but then we were in India, all over India, Nepal. We even went to the Middle East. So we went to Egypt, Jordan, Israel. We went to places like Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia.
Wow. That's quite an
basically
opportunity.
anywhere that was cheap,
Yeah. So not Europe.
not
No.
Europe. To date, Nancy and I love traveling. To date, we've traveled to over 40 countries.
That's great.
That's
Yeah.
really neat.
So back to ministry, though. Then I got back into ministry after traveling. Worked in Abbotsford at Emmanuel Fellowship Baptist for 5 years.
It's the youth and young adults guy.
Yeah, youth and young adults, and felt, it was interesting. After a sermon I preached once, Jim, I said to Jim, the lead pastor, give me some critique, and he said, "Well, you're a good communicator, Andy, but you just lack depth." And I put in my resignation about 2 weeks later. I think he wished he hadn't said that. But it all ended up being good. I just realized he was right, and I needed to get more depth of my understanding of the Bible and growing as a pastor. So I went to Biola. Now,
You did a master's degree there in apologetics. Was it the MA in apologetics that they offer?
Yeah. Now,
Biola, just so people know, where is Biola?
So Biola is in Southern California. Right. Now, when I went down there, though, I think this is an important part. I was never really into apologetics. I thought it was interesting. I'd love to go back in time and ask if I even knew what that word meant. When I went down, though, I went to Biola to go off into missions. My wife and I have always seen ourselves as missionaries. And her and I love missions, and that's how we ended up even starting to date, was all about missions. She had served in inner city Los Angeles, and I had been numerous times to Argentina and other places serving, and that's what we wanted to do with our life. So when we went down to Biola, we had no intentions of coming back to Canada. We had every intention of heading off to some jungle island, sharing the gospel. And as I thought about how best to share the gospel, that was when I began to think about apologetics and understanding understanding the culture, being able to communicate clearly to a culture. And it was at that time that God began to redirect me back to Canada, and really in some ways as a missionary back to Canada, as I began to hear about how many young adults were leaving the faith. So that's how that actually took place.
So what is your degree? What is your degree in then?
So it's in apologetics, and the reason why I went to Biola, though, is because this is one of my beefs with seminaries. Seminaries are set up for people actually like you, Jeff, that you did your BA.
That's his beef. It's set up for people like me.
Well, you did your BA in something non-biblical.
Yeah,
you did communications.
Yeah.
I did my BA. I did 4 years in biblical studies. I didn't want to have to go to a seminary and repeat a bunch of classes that I've already done, which is the way a lot of seminaries are set up. So one of the things I liked I had actually applied at Oxford and Biola. Oxford first, and I went through the whole application process with Oxford. And
what were you going to do there?
Part of the, I was going to do philosophy.
Okay.
Part of the thing at Oxford is you have to do an interview with them. And so during the interview, the guy had been to Biola and was talking about Biola, and I thought, that sounds like a good school. So that's how I'd heard about it. And then I thought, I might not get accepted here, so I should probably go put in another application down at Biola. And they had a master's degree that's done through the university, which is the apologetics one. And it allows you, if you already have your BA in biblical studies, to offset those kind of courses with things like philosophy that you feel that you need more of.
So you there for 2 years?
Oh, yeah. So I ended up getting accepted at the Oxford one, but I didn't like it as much as the Biola one. So we ended up moving down to Biola.
Great.
It's a 2-year program. However, I had already had some coursework done at Acts Seminary, long story short. So I was able to do it in a year and a half.
Okay. Wow. So about 18 months you're in Southern California.
Yeah.
Do you come back to Canada at that point and start looking around and thinking that, they could, because you were influenced a little bit by some of the apologetic stuff that you saw down in the States and tried to emulate it, from what I understand, tried to emulate some of it up here in Canada, because it's just there's not really much along those lines in Canada.
Well, I'd never seen it before. And again, long story short, I took a course on debate and logic with William Lane Craig. And part of that course is they only allowed 15 students to take it, and you had to debate each other. And different organizations and professors would come watch these debates. And so I participated in this, and I did well in my debate. And so there was an organization there called Apologetics.com, and they have a radio show in Los Angeles and invited me onto the radio show. And so then throughout the year, I started doing radio with this organization, and I began to see the influence that this ministry was having on people.
So what kind of questions would people deal with on this radio show? Like, what would they ask?
Well, your typical questions, the meaning of life, does God exist? Why is there evil? Do all religions lead to God? Is there life after death? Those sorts of questions. Then some really difficult ones on top of it. And I'll never forget, actually, this was a really pivotal moment for me, when we would drive down to Los Angeles as a carload of thinkers, and we're talking. I've spent most of my life having conversations with people, knowing that they always have a duration I can go before I bore them, and I know that I need to change the conversation into like a poop joke or something, right?
What were you just saying? Just kidding.
And to go an entire car ride with these guys and realizing that I'm not exhausting the conversation and that they love this as much as I love this, I began to realize that maybe I'm actually wired in this direction.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I think at some point or another, as you age, you start to realize what you're good at and the things that really engage you. And
How old would you have been at this point?
Would have been my 30s.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting? So all those years, and then you finally figure out,
Starts to come together.
And which I find really bizarre. Again, it's one of those times I'd love to go back in time and go, hey, Andy, let me talk to you about some philosophy stuff.
maybe you'd find it interesting.
Yeah.
It should be a good reminder to those who are listening, either if they have kids or if you are younger, that you know what, eventually it comes together and you start realizing what you're good at. And the older you get, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm just now kind of realizing, I seem to focus better on this stuff and not that stuff. I wonder if that's because I'm, and you start to realize what you're capable of doing.
Totally.
So it takes some guts to found a ministry, though, Andy.
Yeah.
So I started realizing I'm gifted at this, but more than that, it was I saw the incredible need. And so I really never thought about would I fail or something like that. I just thought, man, there's so many young adults up here that need Jesus and that are abandoning the faith for stupid reasons. I've got to engage with them. And so I just came up and started doing that. And
how did you start? What was the first thing that Apologetics Canada did?
Do you know the very first thing that we did is I met with Nancy's family. This is how a ministry starts. You meet with your family and you sit them down and go, look at what we're going to go do.
And what'd they say?
And they thought it was the most ridiculous thing they'd ever heard in their life. Now they're all proud of Nancy and I.
I was there when it began. I was in that room.
But truthfully, most people thought it was just the stupidest thing they'd ever heard. Apologize for what?
So what was your first event or thing that you did?
So then the very first thing we did once, we started in this ministry, and which was very uphill because apologetics was very unknown at that time. But the very first thing that we did is we thought about hosting a conference, to which one of our only supporters told us that was a stupid idea and no one would ever come out to an apologetics conference. And then I started having a conversation with John Morrison. He was a young adults pastor in Coquitlam, and he and I said, well, let's give it a shot. And we filled up Coquitlam Church with some 600 people.
Wow.
Yeah, Coquitlam Alliance. I remember being there I was there for that early one.
How many years ago was that?
So that was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
And
how long have you been hosting them at Northview? It's at least
Well,
7.
they did there, and then they went to Peace Portal Alliance Church for a year, 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year. We realized we needed a bigger church. We really didn't expect that.
No.
And realized, okay, we're going to need a bigger church. So then we go to Peace Portal, and we had over 800. And then we realized we're going to need a bigger church. And it was at that time that Jeff contacted me, or I contacted you. I can never remember.
We got connected with each other somehow.
And because J.P. Moreland was speaking at that Peace Portal conference, and Jeff was doing his doctorate under J.P.
Yeah.
And so that's when I met Jeff and Kyle. And I'll never forget, Jeff, when you and I met for the first time. I came out here to Northview. And I can't remember all that took place, but something happened with my car, and I needed to borrow my mom's minivan all the way from Portland. I drove it up, and my mom's got 4 dogs that she, keeps in that thing, and it's just gross. And so I have to drive this thing, and I come to work, and that was back when you used to like to ride your bike.
Yep.
And you're like, I rode my bike, and we're going out to lunch. He's like, can we take your car? And I'm like, this is the worst.
I do remember the car. There's a lot of dog hair in that car. Yeah.
And the smell.
Oh, that was humbling.
No, it was good though, and you've held it here at Northview. 7 years?
This will be the 7th year.
Yeah. We went that first year. I was new on staff. We brought our 13-year-old son Carter at the time, and he was so excited. He didn't understand half of what was said, but what the half he did get, he was so excited, and he's been coming every year since.
It's not a super long conference,
No.
and so it scratches the itch though of it starts at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on a Friday, and it's over by 3 or 4 the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But
lots of different
there's
breakouts.
lots of breakouts. There's lots of, but the time is maximized. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of wasted space.
No.
There's a number of speakers who are doing good work and end up.
It's
And
interesting.
we've had some really
Yeah.
engaging people come and share and talk about things, from all over the place. And it's all all the ones that I've ever heard have been really excellent. Whether you agree with them or you don't agree with them, they give you something really profound to think about. They're largely helpful. Sometimes it's over your head. And other times for some people, and then other times it's just right in their wheelhouse, and they love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say 2 things here. One is, a special thanks to Jeff, because he really, I know he's gonna make
soak it
a
in.
joke. Yeah, no, soak it in and joke about it. But truthfully, he took a a step of faith with having this guy that's just starting this organization and working with the conference and then bringing this organization in and taking a chance on me. And I've told him thank you.
Yeah, but I think that you and I shared a common concern, and that is that neither of us want to see young people abandon the faith for stupid reasons. I understand why somebody might abandon the faith for, life situations. You know what I mean? Like they struggle with trying to figure out why personally this certain thing happened to them between God. I understand the existential crisis that's there, but you shouldn't be abandoning the faith because of your thinking. Christianity has a long, rich history of being some of the smartest people on the block.
And honestly, that's what inspired the conference, is when you begin to look into the history of Christianity, you begin to realize that we have a robust intellectual tradition. And my desire has always been to continue that. And so when putting the conference together is really me going, this is what I want to go to. A conference is dealing with the questions people are addressing right now. And I think, how cool has it been over the years when I have met so many non-Christians that come to the conference and explain to me this is the only place that I have to even go to hear somebody talk on these questions.
Yeah, and you haven't shied away, though, from the questions either, though. I think the conference itself doesn't pull punches when it comes to trying to address the genuine challenges. It's not every year, hey, here's, the 5 historical views on, why God exists. We've had that, Bill Craig did that on one occasion, but others have come and you've engaged with issues relating. I mean, last time it was about what does it mean to be human, and those issues around that, which are so prevalent today, and they are the questions of people, identity, and these things are the ones that people are. No, so I think, Andy, you've done well. Your team has done well you have your finger on the pulse of the culture at large, and are able to say, okay, so how can we think well about this particular set of questions that people are actually either asking quietly or out loud on Twitter or whatever?
It's been an interesting part, by the way, of doing this conference that a lot of people don't realize, is that most conferences are built on your speakers.
Yeah.
But we knew right away we couldn't build a conference that way. It's so difficult to bring in your headlining speakers and to try to do that year after year to build the conference. And so what we did instead was build trust with people, saying, would you just trust us? Come out to this conference. We are going to address questions that are current, and we're going to bring some of the best thinkers on those issues, although you maybe never have heard of them before.
So, and it's been the case.
So we want to dive into some more mature content. But before we do that, Andy, give us a little bit of a flavor for what you're excited about for this conference coming up, beginning of March.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conference in that there's many things, but for the Friday night, we are addressing an incredibly important topic here in Canada specifically, and that is the question of religious freedom. So as soon as I had seen what had taken place with the Trinity Western case and other things that had preceded that, including I was at the National Prayer Breakfast, and some of the discussions that were going on, I realized freedom is a huge question in Canada right now, and it must be addressed. And so Steve, Kim, Terry, and I sat down and we said, okay, who would be the top 3 people we'd love to have at Northview discussing this question? And these are the 3. Andrew Shooten works with ARPA Canada, and he was one of the interveners at the TWU case, Supreme Court case.
So he had front row seat to the whole thing.
Right.
That was only last spring.
And so he's a lawyer. Then we have Rachel Harder, who's an MP from Lethbridge, and she's also the shadow minister for the status of women, who has had numerous challenges in her political career, including being penalized for her views on abortion, for example. And so we wanted. I remember the first time I met her, I was like, "Oh man, we've got to bring her out." Such a young but sharp thinker that stands up for her beliefs. And then we've got Andrew Bennett, who's the director of Cardis Religious Freedom Institute at Cardis Law. Now he was the first person ever appointed to the Committee for Religious Freedom under the previous government. As soon as this government came in, he was let go. But these 3 have their pulse on the religious freedom and going on, the debates going on here in Canada, and I can't wait to be a part of this dialogue.
And it is the live discussion that's being had now.
It is, and
in Canada.
It's funny too because these 3 they're over the moon to come and dialogue on this with each other. So they're excited about this as
You
well.
have some
I
other
bet.
speakers. One of my old professors is coming.
Yeah, Daryl Bach,
Daryl Bach.
who most people don't realize this, but he's probably, I would argue, top 3
He's one of the best New Testament scholars in the world.
in the world.
Yeah.
Top 3.
Wow.
So he's coming out.
Yeah.
We have,
And by that, when I say that, I don't mean just as an exegete, which meaning that, like, he can interpret the Bible well.
Right.
He's written the best commentaries probably on Luke and Acts, although Craig Keener's Acts commentary is pretty great. But he's written some top shelf commentaries. But Daryl's skills are in cultural evaluation and also in the historical tradition, like what is Jesus a real guy? How do I know? All that kind of stuff. Really, he's engaged a lot with apologetics. He's great.
Yeah, so we're excited to have him. George Yancey coming out talking on racial gridlock. And then we're flying in. So we have a whole bunch of breakout session speakers. And we also have Noi coming from Bangkok.
Nice.
And we're going to be doing an interview with her, which I'm quite excited about. So one of the things people always get as a part of this conference that's important to me is head and heart.
Yep.
You'll see that we're going to address all both of those.
And don't be surprised. Like, if you come, you might be hearing us right now thinking, if you've not come before, don't be surprised that they will sing. And that's part of the reason that they're not ashamed to say, look, we're Christian people and we sing to God, and we believe that there's a heart aspect to all of these sort of thing. And you can know God, not just with your mind, but the rest of you as well.
That's right.
So it's genuine. So don't be surprised if you show up and somebody wants to sing some songs. If you're a skeptic or stuff, it's awesome. Come along, bring your skeptical friends. You just might want to tell them ahead of time.
Yep.
Skeptics
love coming.
Don't be surprised if there's a little bit of singing, but you're gonna you're gonna be engaged.
Totally. Okay, we want to dive into some mature content. So parents, if you are driving along with your kids, this might be the time to turn off the podcast and listen to it on your own with your own headphones. But Andy, since you're here, we wanted to talk a little bit about new horizons in porn culture.
Okay.
So you're on the spot.
Why are
Let's
you asking Andy that question?
Because he's been talking about the dehumanization of people,
he
and
has.
it's this perfect
And this is
topic.
like one of the
Yeah.
one of the flashpoints for it.
This is a question that I receive a lot from my studies and just time spent with ministering to young adults. Is people ask me, Andy, where's culture going?
Yeah.
What's kind of the next thing? And I think that the direction that culture has been going is the same direction it's been going since the fall. Since Adam and Eve, right? I like the way that C.S. Lewis penned it in his title to his book, The Great Divorce. Yeah. That humanity has divorced themselves from God, but they're also in the process of divorcing themselves from each other. And so what we see in our culture then is a divorcing of ourselves from one another that takes place in dehumanizing ways, and pornography is one of those, where we feed our narcissism. And one of the ways that we can do that through technology is in unique ways we've never been able to do it before.
How is that dehumanizing, Andy?
Yeah, so that now
It's dehumanizing for the person, for the object.
Right. So
The object of the porn, I mean. Is that what you mean?
Well, to be really clear, dehumanization takes place in one of two ways: either to see a person as an animal or object. And so in the case of pornography, you objectify a human being. And so now you have these relational needs that we will seek to meet, whether that's through social media or through something like pornography. But it becomes this thing that becomes incredibly narcissistic. Take social media, for example, right? I'll take everything that I want from it, but, if somebody bothers me, I'm going to defriend them. I'm only going to show you a certain aspect of my life, only the good stuff, nothing else, right? And so we really start to reduce each other to our Instagram pictures, right? And it doesn't give you an actual, full picture of this human being, but nor does it actually address your deep needs as a human being, as a relational creature. So when we move over into pornography, what you see is that, people have these deep relational needs that are sexual needs that, in sexual intimacy. But as we see in different cultures, and even our own, that relationships are difficult. It's not easy to be married. It's not easy to deal with people's families, right? in children and all those different aspects. But it's so much easier if I've got my my Facebook profile, I got my Instagram pics, but then I got my pornography where I'm trying to feed myself.
You've cobbled it together. You've cobbled together
That's
the
right.
easiest version of all the stuff. Like
Right.
that a full-orbed relationship is going to give you all of that stuff, but it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
So it's going to give me everything I want without all that bad stuff that's difficult to deal with. And one of the areas that we're seeing this is in the area of what's called robot sex or sex dolls.
Yeah, or that's seems to be the next. I mean, I think a lot of people out who are listening to us might not be aware that what's happened in pornography was those of us who are men, especially. I remember when I was a kid going through the cash register, and there was the little Playboy magazines that were hidden behind the counter
in the magazines.
In the magazine,
Yeah.
so you would ask the person to get it, and then that you'd have to get it, and it was hidden from sight, And so it's moved from that to the advent, of course, of DVDs and things, which you still had to go into a shop and purchase. But now, because of the advent of the internet, it's so easy, and then that takes one step further with the cell phone. It's mobile now. You can take it anywhere you want. And now the next step that a lot of people might not be aware of is the virtual reality. You put a set of goggles on, and they even have devices that stimulate the body while you're wearing the thing, so that it's they're trying to make it as lifelike as they possibly can. But now they're stepping the next direction, which is like, well, if we really want to supply people with, solve their sexual needs, why we're getting to the point with robots that we're able to actually just make sex bots, right? And you can make them look like however you want, or these sorts of things.
Yeah, which is an interesting thought, right? So I want this doll to look this way, right? And then again, this doll is this, by the way, something else that's happening with porn culture is not just with dolls, but even virtually, where you can go, I want this, I want a picture of a naked person that looks like my friend, or my coworker, or whatever that might be, right? Again, the whole idea is it is allowing you to divorce yourself from people.
Yeah, but you can use that person not as the real person that they are. You can just make them to look like what you want.
And they can do the things you want them to do.
Right. They're not actual people.
No.
And so I get what I want, but I don't have to deal with all that yucky stuff like, like you've had a bad day, or I have to meet your father, or, we're going to have children, or whatever that might be, right? So what ends up happening is you begin to isolate yourself from people more and more.
So what's the danger in that, Andy? I mean, some people might be listening to this and thinking to themselves, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. You know what I mean? I don't have to have any of the problems.
Well, also because we think it's sort of safer, right? Your sex bot isn't going to get pregnant, and your sex bot isn't going to give you a disease.
Yeah, I imagine that's part of how it's going to be sold. Don't have the traditional problem with prostitution.
And it's not actual sort of physical abuse on a person, so it's easier for you or better for you to have sex with a sex bot or a doll of some sort.
It's just masturbation is what he's saying. Who's against that? That's what a lot of people will end up arguing, and it has all these positive outcomes.
Well, they'll say it's not hurting someone.
No, it's not hurting someone at all. And so, Andy, what's the bad?
So I would argue that there's two things that are taking place there. One is, yes, it is hurting somebody, and I'm going to circle back to this, but the first and foremost is hurting you.
Yeah.
But secondly, yes, it is also hurting other people. So a lot of documentaries have come out about this, how pornography, let's go with actual pornography, is actually hurting those people that are participating in that pornography. So we could say, okay, that's hurting them. But then there's this aspect where you're not just hurting yourself, and I would actually go much further and say that this is actually dehumanizing you, because if you are a relational being in your essence and you are removing yourself from relationship, you are dehumanizing yourself.
Yeah.
But think about what this is doing on a grand scale to those people that were going to be your spouse, or those people you were going to be in a friendship with. It doesn't have to be just sexual, right? That no longer now, they no longer have you. And this is an aspect of relationship a lot of people forget. Take church, for example. This is one of the questions that drive me crazy when people ask, does a Christian need to go to church?
Right.
Right. And I'm thinking, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I need you, and you need me. We need each other.
Yeah, the actual me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were created for community, and you will never fully flourish as a human being until you are in relationship with God and each other. And not just any kind of relationship, right relationship.
Yeah.
And so this is ultimately what the point of the Bible is getting at. You were created for relationship. You are divorcing yourself from God and other people. And Jesus has come to reconcile you back to God and one another.
So in some senses, this is just going to perpetuate this move to robot sex. It's just going to perpetuate and make even worse the kinds of issues that we're currently facing.
A culture of loneliness.
Yeah,
is where
with
it's
this
going.
fracturing and the loneliness and the fact that, one of the things I remember counseling a young guy years ago who was he struggled with pornography quite a bit, and he said that the thing that has caused him the most trouble is that he's worried that the woman that he was going to marry, that he was actually going to treat her like a person, and he was not the kind of person who could have expressed the stuff you're expressing, Andy, and with kind of erudite language you're using, but he instinctively knew that I don't think that any actual woman will serve me the way that I can pick and choose my porn experience.
Yeah.
And that frightened him because he had realized that in his a Christian guy, right? He realized that his mind had been so numbed or formed now to expect something that was never going to be the case. He ended up getting married, and I asked him years later. He said it's been a massive struggle for his married life. How do I relate to an actual person after all this?
The real world is messy. It's broken. You have arguments. You have to, ask for forgiveness. You got to work through things. That's reality. Now, it's interesting. In 2017, research came out about loneliness, which, by the way, is epidemic.
It is.
And I wish I had more time to talk about its effects.
It is the Western. It is the Western epidemic, especially. And when I say Western, I don't mean it's not happening in Seoul, Korea, and stuff. I actually am saying that it's the more inward focused on ourselves we've gotten, and the more we've catered to that with stuff like this, the more lonely we've become, and the more people like Thaleia end up having meetings with people.
Yes,
and
this side of heaven. I have lots of work.
She ends up having to point out that, look, the genesis of a lot of this problem is that your whole life is wrapped up in just you.
And what a lot of people don't realize, and this has been interesting in the research, is that loneliness has physical effects on you.
Yep.
It is the equivalent of smoking 5 to 7 cigarettes a day.
Yep.
Is what, if you want to put it in those terms, that's what loneliness is doing. It's not good for you. You weren't made to be alone. You weren't meant to be narcissistic. And by the way, works its way out in other ways. Think about euthanasia, for example, right? Now, we live in this culture that becomes so narcissistic, so about me, that when my mom gets cancer, she starts feeling pressure that maybe she should just take her life so that I don't have to watch her get sick or deal with any of that, because it's hard for you.
Right.
But maybe it's supposed to be hard for you. Maybe you actually do need to watch your mom go through cancer. Maybe you actually do need to love her through that to her final breaths, right?
So even
because that's what it is to be human.
Well, my mind goes to the pastoral epistles. That's essentially what Paul's saying to Timothy. That there's kind of a repayment attitude. In 1 Timothy, the latest verses of 1 Timothy, like you owe it to your parents. They looked after you for years. Now you owe it to them. Listen, I'm not suggesting that maybe the best place for them is not in a nursing home where they can have 24-hour-a-day care and all that kind of stuff. But I am suggesting that it is the responsibility of people like kids to look after mom and dad,
or at least in a society that at least values palliative care over, hey, take this pill so we don't have to deal with anything.
Mm-hmm.
But increasingly, that's going to be the case. Do you think, Andy? I mean, increasingly, it's going to be the case that whatever helps the individual have the easiest, most fulfilling, in the moment life will be the thing that happens in the culture.
Yeah.
And we don't realize its effects. The other day, I was speaking at a university, and a blind girl was there and was brought up to the front to talk with me afterwards, and she had tears in her eyes. And she was explaining to me that how devalued she feels in our culture, that she feels like she's a burden, that she's, a financial, drain on our culture. And via the movies and the songs and the media that we experience, we don't realize the kind of messages that we send to the disabled community and to the elderly community, where they feel incredibly devalued and uncertain of the future.
Wow, we could have a lot of fun talking about
Listen,
these kinds
you
of
know
topics.
what? People are, but
Yeah.
listen, people, the point is that Andy's agreeing with, and I'm sure you do too,
Yeah.
Thalia, is that at the end of the day, your relationship with God needs to be sorted so that your relationship with others can be sorted.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, yes, it's hard, but the gospel can create unity where there was disunity, both between God and with those you even don't like at the present moment. So that there is a healing work that the gospel brings.
Yeah.
And so we do hold in our hands and hearts and minds the answer to the question that the culture is asking by yelling about it. So let's not be shy in giving it.
Andy,
Amen.
thanks so much for joining us today, and we really hope that you come back again, because there are topics we can talk about.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone.